Benjamin Hartley stepped out of his silver Mercedes and stared at the small building before him. The sign hanging crooked above the entrance read Chen's Auto Works with faded red letters. He sighed deeply. This was his 8th attempt to fix. His beloved 1968 Ford Mustang and his patience had worn thinner than old brake pads. The car had been his grandfather's pride. Every curve, every chrome detail held memories of summer drives and life lessons. Now, it sat silent on the side of the road, refusing to start no matter what expensive mechanics tried. Benjamin had visited specialist shops across 3 counties. None could solve the mystery. He walked into the garage, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the oil-stained concrete floor. The space smelled of motor oil and metal. Old engine parts lined wooden shelves along the walls. A radio played soft country music from somewhere in the back. "Hello," Benjamin called out. "Is anyone here who actually knows how to fix classic cars?" A figure emerged from beneath an old pickup truck. Grease covered the person's hands and arms. When they stood up and faced him, Benjamin saw a young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail. Her brown eyes studied him with quiet confidence. "I'm Ruby Chen," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I can help you with your car." Benjamin raised one eyebrow. She looked too young, too ordinary. How could she succeed where 7 specialists had failed? Tried to hide his doubt, but knew his face showed everything. "With respect, Miss Chen, I've already taken this car to the best mechanics in the state. Engineers with decades of experience couldn't figure out what's wrong. What makes you think you can—" Ruby crossed her arms and leaned against the workbench behind her. A small smile appeared on her lips. Maybe because those experts stopped listening to what the car was trying to tell them. Her answer caught him off guard. Benjamin had heard many mechanics promise miracles, but something in Ruby's calm tone made him pause. She spoke about the car like it was a living thing. "If you fix this engine," Benjamin said, letting sarcasm creep into his voice, "I'll give you my entire monthly salary." He expected her to laugh or make excuses. Instead, Ruby's smile widened. "Deal, but I want it in cash." Benjamin blinked twice. She wasn't joking. The boldness of her response stung his pride like a slap. He had offered the bet as a challenge, never thinking anyone would actually accept. "Fine," he said stiffly. The car's parked right outside. The miracle worker Ruby grabbed a worn toolbox from the corner. The metal case had seen better days. Scratches and dents covered its surface. She carried it outside to where the Mustang sat waiting. The car was beautiful even in its broken state. Deep blue paint gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Chrome bumpers reflected the clouds above. Benjamin had spent years maintaining its appearance, but now the engine refused to cooperate. "Open the hood," Ruby said simply. Benjamin pressed the release lever inside the car. The hood lifted with a soft click. Ruby propped it open and stared at the engine for a long moment. She didn't touch anything at first. She just looked, listening to something only she could hear. A small boy appeared at the garage entrance. He wore a school uniform and carried a heavy backpack. His face lit up when he saw Ruby. "Hi, Ruby," the boy called out, running toward them. "Hey, Tommy," Ruby replied without looking away from the engine. "How was school today?" "Boring math class gave us homework for the weekend." Tommy stopped beside Benjamin and studied him with curious eyes. "Who's this guy?" "This is Mr. Hartley. He has a sick Mustang that needs our help." Tommy nodded seriously, as if diagnosing sick cars was the most natural thing in the world. Was only 10 years old, but he understood engines better than most adults. Ruby finally reached into the engine compartment. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, touching different parts, feeling for problems invisible to the untrained eye. She pulled out a length of rubber hose and pressed it against the engine block. Then she held the other end near her ear. Benjamin watched in fascination. What was she doing? It looked like some kind of ancient medical examination. "There," Ruby said after 2 minutes. "I hear it now." She set down the hose and selected tools from her box. Her hands worked quickly, removing 2 small components from the engine. She made an adjustment to something Benjamin couldn't see clearly. Then she cleaned several connectors with a small wire brush. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. "Try starting it now," Ruby said. Stepping back from the car, Benjamin climbed into the driver's seat, certain this would end like all the other attempts. He turned the key slowly, preparing for disappointment. The Mustang roared to life. The sound was perfect. Deep, powerful, and steady. The engine purred, like it had when his grandfather first bought it 50 years ago. Benjamin's hands gripped the steering wheel as shock washed over him. He turned off the engine and got out slowly. Ruby was all ready. Putting her tools away, acting like she had just performed the simplest task in the world. How did you do that?" Benjamin asked. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Ruby closed her toolbox with a soft click. The ignition timing was reversed. It's just a simple connection problem. Your car was asking for help, but nobody listened. Benjamin tried to process what had happened. 7 expensive specialists with fancy equipment and years of training had failed. This young woman with an old toolbox had succeeded in minutes. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. Ruby looked directly into his eyes. "Your monthly salary, you promised." Benjamin laughed nervously. "I was joking about that." Ruby's expression didn't change. She stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "My mother used to say that a person's word shows their character. That honest people keep their promises, even when it costs them." "Are you an honest person, Mr. Hartley?" The question hung in the air between them. Tommy watched the exchange with wide eyes. Benjamin felt his face grow warm. He had made the offer as a joke, a way to mock her confidence. Now she was holding him accountable. "Tomorrow," Benjamin said finally. "I'll bring the money tomorrow." "I'll be here," Ruby replied. She turned back toward the garage, dismissing him without another word. Benjamin got into the Mustang. The engine started smoothly on the first try. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Ruby had already disappeared back into the garage, returning to whatever project she had left unfinished. The drive home felt different. The car ran perfectly, better than it had in months. But Benjamin's mind wasn't on the engine. He kept thinking about Ruby's question. Was he an honest person? The answer should have been simple, but suddenly he wasn't so sure. That night, Benjamin sat in his luxury apartment overlooking the city. He calculated his monthly salary on a piece of paper, $15,000 after taxes, enough to make most people smile for weeks, enough to seriously dent his pride. He thought about backing out of the deal. Nobody would blame him for refusing to honor a joke bet. But every time he considered it, he heard Ruby's voice asking if he was an honest person. The question kept him awake until dawn. Benjamin arrived at Chen's Auto Works exactly at 9 o'clock the next morning. He had spent hours at the bank withdrawing $15,000 in cash. The thick envelope now rested in his jacket pocket, a constant reminder of his expensive lesson in humility. The Mustang's engine still purred perfectly. Every smooth acceleration reminded him that Ruby had accomplished something 7 experts could not. His pride hurt more than his wallet. Ruby was working on an old Chevrolet truck when he entered. Her hands moved quickly, adjusting something deep in the engine compartment. She wore the same grease-stained work clothes from yesterday. Nothing about her appearance suggested she expected a life-changing payment. "Good morning, Miss Chen," Benjamin said, trying to sound casual. Ruby slid out from under the hood and looked at him. "You came back. I wondered if you would remember our agreement." "A Hartley never forgets a debt," Benjamin replied. He pulled the envelope from his pocket and held it out to her. $15,000, exactly as promised. Ruby took the envelope and opened it carefully. She counted the bills quickly, her expression neutral. When she finished, she nodded once and walked to a dusty filing cabinet in the corner. She placed the money in a drawer without ceremony. Benjamin had expected more reaction. Gratitude, excitement, or at least surprise. Instead, Ruby simply returned to the Chevrolet as if receiving $15,000 happened every day. The lack of response bothered him more than he wanted to admit. "You know what, Miss Chen," Benjamin said, crossing his arms. "I have another challenge for you." Ruby stopped working and turned to face him. "Another challenge?" "My company has an engine that's been causing problems for 3 weeks. A whole team of engineers cannot solve it. Would you like to try?" Ruby wiped her hands slowly on a rag. "Why would I do that? Curiosity? Pride? Money?" Benjamin shrugged. "Take your pick." Ruby stepped closer, stopping a few feet away from him. Her eyes held his gaze steadily. "If I fix your factory engine, you treat me with real respect. No more testing, if yesterday was luck. No more condescending comments. No more looking down at my garage." Benjamin felt uncomfortable under her direct stare. Something in her voice carried authority he had not expected to find in this small repair shop. "Deal," he said, extending his hand. Ruby shook it firmly. Her grip was strong and confident. "Then let us go to your factory." The factory visit Hartley Precision Motors occupied a modern industrial complex on the other side of town. Glass buildings reflected the morning sun. Perfectly maintained lawns surrounded paved parking lots. Everything spoke of success and wealth. Ruby parked her faded pickup truck between two expensive sedans. She looked at the impressive buildings with interest, but no intimidation. Benjamin led her through security and into the main development facility. The engineering department filled a large space with white walls and bright fluorescent lights. 5 engineers in button-down shirts stood around a workbench. A V8 engine lay disassembled before them, its parts carefully arranged on clean towels. "Everyone," Benjamin announced. "This is Ruby Chen. She will examine our problem engine." The engineers exchanged glances. A tall man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses frowned deeply. "Is she a consulting specialist from another firm?" "She owns an auto repair shop," Benjamin answered. The silence that followed felt heavy and awkward. Ruby noticed the dismissive looks but showed no reaction. She walked directly to the workbench and studied the engine components carefully. "What is the problem?" she asked. A woman with blonde hair tied in a bun spoke up. "The engine starts fine, but loses power after running for a few minutes. We have checked fuel injection, electrical systems, and cooling. All tests show normal results." Ruby nodded thoughtfully. She asked for paper, and when nobody offered any, she pulled a pen from her pocket. She began making notes on her own forearm. Numbers, simple diagrams, reference points covered her skin. The engineers watched her like she was performing some strange ritual. The gray-haired man whispered something to his colleague. Ruby ignored them completely. "May I remove the cylinder head?" Ruby asked. "Go ahead," Benjamin said. Ruby selected tools from the workbench and began disassembling the engine. Her movements were precise and purposeful. Every action had clear intention behind it. She worked in focused silence while the engineers stood watching. 15 minutes later, Ruby had the cylinder head removed. She examined each component individually, turning them over in her hands. Then she pointed to a small sensor attached to the engine block. "Here is your problem," she said, touching the part gently. "This coolant temperature sensor has a bad internal connection. It sends incorrect data to the computer. The system thinks the engine is overheating, so it automatically reduces power to protect itself." The revelation, the gray-haired engineer shook his head. "That cannot be correct. We tested that sensor multiple times." "You tested it outside the engine," Ruby replied calmly. "The problem only appears when the engine vibrates during operation. The internal contact becomes loose under those conditions." She disconnected the sensor and cleaned its terminals with a small brush. Then she reconnected everything and reassembled the cylinder head with the same quick efficiency she had shown during disassembly. "You can test it now," Ruby said. Stepping away from the workbench, the gray-haired engineer started the engine. The V8 came to life smoothly, settling into a steady idle. He increased the throttle. The engine responded instantly with full power. He pushed it harder. No performance drop occurred. Everyone in the room fell silent. Benjamin stared at Ruby, who was calmly wiping her hands on a borrowed cloth. She had done it again, solving in minutes what others could not solve in weeks. "You are brilliant," Benjamin said, with genuine admiration in his voice. Ruby looked at him with a slight smile. "I prefer to be called a good mechanic." She returned the tools to their places and headed toward the exit. Benjamin followed her down the hallway, still trying to understand what he had witnessed. "How did you know?" he asked, catching up to her. "I listened to the engine," Ruby answered without stopping. "It told me where the problem was." "Engines do not talk," Benjamin said. Ruby stopped walking and turned to face him. To people who know how to listen, they do. You just need to learn their language. She continued toward the parking lot, leaving Benjamin standing alone in the corridor. He had more questions than answers, an absolute certainty that Ruby Chen was far more than just a small-town mechanic. The discovery that evening? Benjamin could not stop thinking about Ruby. Her confidence, her skill, and her mysterious ability to understand engines fascinated him. He wanted to know more about her background and training. He returned to his office and began searching through company files. He typed Chen Auto Works into the database, curious about the garage's history. The search returned no results. He tried different variations. Still nothing. Then he remembered Ruby mentioning her mother had taught her. He searched for Chen in the historical supplier records. One entry appeared from the 1980s. His heart began racing as he read the file name. Chen Project, 1986 to 1988, confidential. Benjamin opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside, he found dozens of technical drawings and designs. All were signed by someone named Margaret Chen, listed as a technical consultant. The dates matched the period when his father had built the company's foundation. He recognized several of the designs immediately. They formed the basis of Hartley Precision Motors' most successful patents. The advanced fuel injection system that had earned millions in profits, the innovative cooling design that set industry standards, the transmission improvements that reduced engine wear by 20%. All of it came from Margaret Chen's work. Benjamin kept reading, finding more documents. Confidentiality agreements, intellectual property transfers, contracts giving Hartley Precision Motors exclusive rights to all innovations developed during the consulting period. Everything was legal. Everything was also completely wrong. At the bottom of the folder, he found a letter dated November 1988. It was addressed to his father, written by Margaret Chen. Mr. Hartley, as we discussed yesterday, I can no longer provide consulting services to your company. Personal circumstances require me to focus on other priorities. I hope the work I contributed over the past 2 years will benefit Hartley Precision Motors. Thank you for the opportunity. Sincerely, Margaret Chen. The letter's tone felt formal and cold, as if written under pressure. Benjamin searched for more information and found handwritten notes from his father in a separate file. Chen wants public recognition for her contributions. Explained that consulting work must remain confidential for competitive reasons. Offered increased compensation to ensure continued secrecy. If she refuses terms, terminate contract immediately. Benjamin felt sick to his stomach. The picture became painfully clear. Margaret Chen had created revolutionary innovations for the company. She had wanted credit for her work. His father had refused, preferring to keep all the glory and profits for Hartley Precision Motors. Margaret Chen had chosen her integrity over money and walked away. His father had then built a fortune on her stolen legacy. Erasing her name from history, Benjamin thought about Ruby working in that small garage, about Tommy helping after school, about the worn toolbox and oil-stained floors. Margaret Chen's daughter was fixing old cars for modest pay, while the Hartley family lived in luxury bought with her mother's genius. He pulled out his phone and called his uncle Victor, who had worked alongside his father since the beginning. I need to ask you about someone named Margaret Chen. A long pause on the other end told Benjamin everything. Where did you hear that name? Victor finally asked. I found files in the company archives. Uncle Victor, did father steal her work? Another pause. Your father was a businessman, Benjamin. He did what was necessary to build this company. He destroyed her career and took credit for her innovations. We paid her fairly for consulting services, Victor said defensively. Everything was legal. Legal and right are not the same thing, Benjamin replied. Did you know her daughter runs a small garage now? She has incredible talent, just like her mother. She should be recognized as one of the best automotive engineers in the country. Instead, she fixes old trucks because nobody knows what her family contributed. Benjamin, that was 30 years ago. Why bring this up now? Because it was wrong then, and it is still wrong now. Benjamin ended the call and sat alone in his office. He looked at the expensive furniture, the view of the city, the awards on his walls. Everything felt tainted now. He thought about Ruby's question from yesterday. Was he an honest person? The answer depended on what he did next. Tomorrow, he would return to Chun's Auto Works. But this time, he would not bring money or job offers. He would bring the truth. And somehow, he would find a way to make things right. Benjamin barely slept that night. He spent hours organizing documents from the company archives. Technical drawings, patent applications, and correspondence, all signed by Margaret Chen. Evidence of genius that had been hidden for 3 decades. At dawn, he drove to a specialty shop downtown. He purchased a leather-bound portfolio and carefully arranged copies of all the documents inside. On the first page, he placed a photograph he had found in the files. It showed a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and grease-stained hands, standing proudly beside an engine prototype. Margaret Chen, in 1987. Benjamin arrived at the garage at 8 o'clock. Ruby was already there, as he expected. She was teaching Tommy how to adjust a carburetor on an old sedan. The boy listened carefully, his small hands following her instructions. "Good morning, Miss Chen," Benjamin said quietly. Ruby looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Hartley, I did not expect to see you again so soon. I need to talk with you. It is important." He held up the leather portfolio. "It is about your mother." Ruby's expression changed instantly. She set down her tools and walked toward him slowly. "What about my mother?" Benjamin took a deep breath. "Can we sit down somewhere?" Ruby led him to a small office at the back of the garage. The space was cramped but organized. A desk held neatly stacked invoices and repair manuals. On the wall hung a framed photograph of a woman working on an engine. The same woman from the company files. "That is her," Ruby said softly, noticing where Benjamin was looking. "My mother, Margaret Chen, she died 5 years ago." "I know," Benjamin said. "And I am so sorry for what my family did to her." He placed the portfolio on the desk and opened it. Ruby stared at the documents, her eyes widening as she began to understand what she was seeing. "Your mother worked as a consultant for Hartley Precision Motors from 1986 to 1988, Benjamin began. She developed some of the most innovative automotive designs of that decade. Fuel injection systems, cooling improvements, transmission modifications. All of it came from her brilliant mind." Ruby touched the technical drawings gently, as if they might disappear. "I never knew she worked for a big company. She only told me she used to do consulting work before I was born. She stopped because my father refused to give her public credit," Benjamin continued. His voice felt heavy with shame. "She wanted recognition for her contributions. He wanted to keep everything secret, to protect the company's competitive advantage. When she insisted, he forced her to choose between anonymity and leaving." Ruby looked up at him, tears forming in her eyes. "She chose to leave." "Yes, and my father made sure her reputation suffered. He spread rumors that she was difficult to work with, that she made unreasonable demands. Other companies refused to hire her because of those lies." The weight of truth. Ruby stood abruptly and walked to the window. She stared out at the garage bay where Tommy continued working on the carburetor, unaware of the conversation happening behind closed doors. "So that is why she opened this garage," Ruby said quietly. "She had no other choice." "I am sorry," Benjamin said. "My family built everything on her work. We made millions from her innovations. And she spent 30 years fixing cars in this small shop, never getting the recognition she deserved." Ruby turned to face him. Anger and sadness mixed in her expression. "Do you know what my mother told me before she died? She said the most important thing was not how much money you make or how famous you become. She said the most important thing was staying true to yourself and helping people. Even after everything your father did to her, she never became bitter. She just kept working, kept teaching me, kept fixing engines for people who needed help." Benjamin felt tears in his own eyes. "Your mother was a better person than my father ever was." "Why are you telling me this now?" Ruby asked. "Why not just keep the secret buried?" "Because it was wrong. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because I want to make things right?" Ruby laughed bitterly. "How can you make this right? My mother is gone. You cannot give her back 30 years of her life. You cannot undo the damage to her career. No, I cannot, Benjamin admitted. But I can give her the recognition she should have received. I can tell the world that Margaret Chen was the true genius behind Hartley Precision Motors' success. I can pay you the royalties your mother should have earned, and I can make sure her name is remembered. Ruby studied him for a long moment. Why would you do that? It will hurt your company's reputation. People will question everything your father built. Let them question, Benjamin said firmly. The truth matters more than reputation. Tommy appeared in the doorway, his face concerned. Ruby, is everything okay? You look upset. Ruby wiped her eyes quickly and smiled at the boy. Everything is fine, Tommy. Mr. Hartley was just telling me some important news about my mother. Tommy walked over and took Ruby's hand. Was it good news or bad news? Both, Ruby answered. Sometimes the truth is complicated. A new beginning. Over the next week, Benjamin worked tirelessly. He hired a public relations firm to prepare an announcement. He met with lawyers to calculate the royalties Margaret Chen should have received. He contacted automotive industry publications too. Share the real story of the innovations that changed modern engines. Every evening. He returned to Chun's Auto Works, not to make business offers or test Ruby's skills, but simply to help. He changed oil, replaced brake pads, and learned how to listen to what engines were trying to say. His hands developed calluses. His expensive clothes stayed in the closet, replaced by old jeans and simple shirts. He discovered muscles he had forgotten existed. Ruby remained distant at first, unsure whether to trust his intentions. But slowly, as days turned into weeks, she began to soften. She saw that Benjamin was genuinely trying to change, to become someone worthy of respect. One evening, as they were closing the garage, Tommy made an announcement. I think you two should work together on something big. Ruby raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, Tommy? You are both really smart about engines, the boy explained. Ruby knows how to make them sing. Mr. Hartley knows how to build companies. Together, you could create something amazing. Benjamin looked at Ruby. He has a point. What did you have in mind? Ruby asked cautiously. A new project, Benjamin said. Not for Hartley Precision Motors. Something completely separate. We could design an engine that honors your mother's legacy. Something revolutionary that carries her name. Ruby crossed her arms. And what would I get out of this partnership? Equal ownership. Equal credit. Complete transparency. And the chance to show the world what Margaret Chen's daughter can do. Ruby thought for a long moment. I would want Tommy involved too. He has talent that deserves development, agreed, Benjamin said immediately. He can be our apprentice. Tommy's face lit up with joy. Really? I can help design engines? You can learn everything we know, Ruby promised. The Chun Hartley engine 3 months later, Ruby and Benjamin stood in a rented workshop space downtown. The room was filled with equipment purchased specifically for their joint project. Clean workbenches, modern diagnostic tools, and traditional hand tools hung side by side on the walls. In the center of the space sat their prototype, an innovative hybrid engine that combined traditional mechanical precision with cutting-edge electronic systems. It was more efficient than anything currently on the market, yet simple enough to repair with basic tools. They had named it the Margaret Chen Memorial Engine. The official announcement had been made 2 weeks earlier. Major automotive publications ran stories about Margaret Chen's contributions to the industry. Hartley Precision Motors issued a formal apology and established a scholarship fund in her name. Benjamin personally delivered a check to Ruby for $3 million in back royalties. Ruby had cried when she saw the amount. Then she had donated half of it to the orphanage where Tommy lived, ensuring other children would have opportunities she had been given. Now they were preparing for the engines. Public demonstration. Investors, journalists, and industry experts would arrive tomorrow. The Margaret Chen Memorial Engine would either revolutionize automotive design or fail spectacularly. Either way, the world would finally know the truth. Are you nervous? Benjamin asked as they made final adjustments. Terrified, Ruby admitted. What if it does not work? What if we embarrass my mother's memory? Your mother would be proud no matter what happens, Benjamin said, because you stayed true to yourself. Because you refuse to compromise your values for money or fame. Because you've taught me that engines have souls and people deserve second chances. You have changed a lot in 3 months, Mr. Hartley. Call me Benjamin. We are partners now, okay, Benjamin? And you can call me Ruby. Tommy ran into the workshop, his school backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Did I miss anything? Is the engine ready? Almost, Ruby said. Want to help with the final checks? The three of them worked together until darkness fell outside. They tested every system, verified every connection, and made sure the engine performed perfectly. When they finally finished, they stood back and admired their creation. The demonstration the next morning, 50 people filled the workshop. Investors in expensive suits stood beside mechanics in work clothes. Journalists held cameras and recording devices. Everyone wanted to see if the Chen-Hartley partnership would deliver on its promises. Benjamin addressed the crowd first. He told the complete story of Margaret Chen's contributions to Hartley Precision Motors. He explained how his father had stolen credit for her work. He apologized publicly for the injustice and announced the new engine designed to honor her memory. Then Ruby stepped forward. She spoke about her mother's passion for engines, her belief that machines could have souls, and her dedication to helping people. She explained the innovative features of their new design, and how it represented everything her mother had valued. Finally, Tommy helped them wheel the engine to the center of the room. Ruby connected the fuel lines and electrical systems. Benjamin checked the computer diagnostics. Everything showed green. "This is for you, Mom," Ruby whispered. She turned the key. The Margaret Chen memorial engine roared to life. The sound was perfect, powerful, yet smooth, efficient, yet full of character. It ran flawlessly through every test, exceeding all performance targets. The crowd erupted in applause. Investors immediately began making offers. Journalists asked questions. Industry experts congratulated them on achieving something truly special, but Ruby only had eyes for the engine. She placed her hand on its warm surface and smiled. Her mother's legacy was finally recognized. Her mother's dream was finally realized. Benjamin stood beside her, his own hand resting on the engine. "We did it," he said softly. "No," Ruby corrected. "She did it. We just finished what she started." 6 months, Laddick and Hartley Engineering occupied a modern facility on the edge of town. The company employed 30 people, including several mechanics Ruby had trained personally. Orders for the Margaret Chen Memorial engine exceeded production capacity by 300%. Benjamin had sold his shares in Hartley Precision Motors to focus completely on the new venture. He no longer wore expensive suits or drove luxury cars. He had discovered that working with his hands brought more satisfaction than any board meeting ever had. Ruby had expanded her original garage but kept it running as a community service. She offered free repairs to families who could not afford them and taught automotive skills to young people who wanted to learn. Tommy, 11 years old, split his time between school and the workshop. He had become their best troubleshooter, able to diagnose problems other engineers missed. Ruby and Benjamin were already planning to send him to engineering school when he got older. One evening, as they were locking up the facility, Ruby turned to Benjamin. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That first day, when you made the bet about your salary, did you ever imagine things would turn out like this?" Benjamin laughed. "Not in a million years. I thought I was just challenging a small-town mechanic. Instead, I met someone who changed my entire life." "Changed your life?" Ruby asked. "You taught me the difference between machines and engines with souls. You showed me that success means nothing if it is built on lies. You helped me become someone my grandfather would have been proud of." Ruby smiled. "Your grandfather sounds like he was a good man." "He was. I think he would have liked you. And he definitely would have loved what we built together." They walked to their vehicles in comfortable silence. Benjamin climbed into his old pickup truck, purchased used from a farmer 3 months ago. Ruby got into her mother's restored sedan, kept running with the same care Margaret had shown 30 years earlier. As Benjamin drove home, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. A broken engine, a mocking bet, and a talented mechanic had transformed everything. He had lost his pride, his luxury lifestyle, and his family company, but he had gained something far more valuable. He had gained purpose, partnership, and the knowledge that he was finally living with integrity. The Margaret Chen memorial engine would change the automotive industry. But the real revolution had happened inside Benjamin's heart, where a woman named Ruby Chen had taught him how to listen, how to care, and how to build something that truly mattered. Tommy had been right all along. Sometimes broken engines could be fixed, and sometimes broken people could be fixed too. All it took was patience, honesty, and someone willing to teach you how to listen.